Foreigners in God's house. Uh, this weekend's readings, and the gospel in particular, contain some frightening remarks by Jesus that are often taken as warnings against complacency for Christians. Now, while that interpretation may have some merit, a more context based understanding actually leads us to a more encouraging interpretation. So let's go look at this. And sorry, this reflection will run a bit long because we need to unpack the historical context of this gospel reading. Jesus is asked, will only a few be saved? He responds, strive to enter through the narrow gate. For many, I tell you, will attempt to enter, but will not be strong enough. Luke 13:24. What is he talking about? Strong enough? Isn't salvation a free gift, not something I work at to get? St. Paul certainly thought so. Quote, for freedom Christ set us free. Do not submit again to a yoke of slavery, to work, right? Galatians 5:1. And it gets worse. Jesus warns, you will say, we ate and drank in your company, and you taught in our streets. Then the master will say to you, I do not know where you are from. Depart from me, all you evildoers. Luke 13:27. In the Greek, the words, we ate and drank in your company, are literally, we ate and drank in sight of you. That should scare any Catholic because eating and drinking in the sight of Jesus sounds a hell of a lot like receiving communion. And teaching in our streets sounds like sitting through the liturgy of the word at Mass as well. And for us Catholics, if faithful attendance at Mass doesn't do the job, we're really in trouble. Note, my Protestant readers are now shouting yes at their screens. Fair enough. But here's the good news, maybe. Look at today's first reading from Isaiah 66, so called third Isaiah, written after the Judahites returned from their exile in Babylon. The returnee leadership's main focus was on rebuilding the temple and reestablishing the temple rituals and priesthood and the ritual laws of daily life, the dietary rules and cleanliness rules. See Ezra chapter 3. So it must have come as a real shock when the prophet announced that Yahweh would be calling foreigners, people from Tarshish, Put and Lud, Mosach, and the distant coastlands, all non Israelites, to bring offerings to the temple. And worse, the prophet states, some of these I will take as priests and Levites. Isaiah 66:21. We 21st century citizens of the world cannot easily feel the disgust those words of Isaiah would have aroused in any self respecting Jew in 5th century BCE Jerusalem. Here God went through the good time and trouble to reestablish his Jewish nation, including the expulsion of non Jewish wives. See Ezra 9. And there goes God saying he will let non Jews act as priests and Levites, like priest assistants, in God's own temple. Make your blood boil, I should say. Now, look again at Jesus' words today, focusing on his final remarks. People will come from the east and the west, and from the north and the south, and will recline at table in the kingdom of God. Luke 13:29. Pay attention to those geographic references, east, west, north, south. To the hearers of his time, Jesus wouldn't just have meant folks generally would be coming, but that non Jews, people from outside the territory of Israel. In other words, Jesus was merely reminding his audience of what 3rd Isaiah had said 5 centuries earlier, that aliens would be welcomed in God's house and even become priests, we call them now priests, and their assistants, deacons. Why would Luke have placed these words of Jesus in his gospel? Well, We know that the controversy about letting Gentiles, non Jews, into full table fellowship with Jewish Christians was still a big issue at the time. Paul struggled with it during his entire ministry, which ended in the early 60s. See Galatians 2:9. And the issue clearly had not gone away by the time Luke was writing about 20 years later. See, for example, Acts 11. So, to sum up, while we probably shouldn't just sit in our butts thinking we've been saved, so it's all good, in other words, we should strive to enter through the narrow gate, like Jesus says. But today's gospel about being confusingly and surprisingly shut out of the house of God shouldn't prey on our minds. In fact, for us non Jewish Christians, it is actually another piece of good news, gospel, that we are welcome in God's house.